everyone, and welcome back to Helping Hands through Haley's Heart. October 17th was raising awareness for conflict resolution. So our topic for today is going to be conflict resolution and some tips and tricks on how to deal with conflict. We all deal with conflict on a daily basis with those around us, and very, very, very differently. When we define conflict, we tend to think more about bigger arguments. However, conflict can be as big or small as we make it. Conflict can simply be a difference of opinion. So when conflict arises, and it will, we must be ready for it. The holidays are coming up, we have friends, we have family around us, so we have to be ready. However, how do we handle conflict, and are we doing it in the healthiest way? So it's okay to take a step back and think about this. I see a lot of couples in premarital counseling and people in the workforce that are working together dealing with conflict resolution, because this is going to come up that we are going to see things a little bit differently than the people around us, and we need to make sure that we're addressing them. Here are just some tips I use when exploring conflict resolution that have been really helpful to some of my clients. Tip number 1 is consider the self, the other, and the context. And I'm going to break that down a little bit. So in an argument, disagreement, conflict, we want to think about ourselves, of course. Our opinions do matter, so we want to think of that. We also want to consider the other person in the situation, walk a mile in their shoes, so to speak. If we don't know, we need to ask how they're feeling. And then, of course, the third, which is the context. And context just means the situation, who's around, and what the deal is. So we want to consider the context, self, and others. And once we do all that, can we truly have a really productive argument, I say disagreement, because we've considered and hit every single one of these things. Tip number 2 is set a time to discuss the conflict. Sometimes life gets too busy and there's just not that present time that we can give to the issue. And sometimes it's deserved. So we need to make sure it's addressed, but in good time and with a better headspace. And giving it a time and a place can sometimes do all of those things. Tip number 3 is think about how I have contributed to the conflict. This is a little bit different because we tend to be blaming sometimes, and we think of how the other person has contributed to the problem, but do we take a step back and think of how we have contributed to the problem at all? It takes two, as they say. So this is taking responsibility for why the conversation wasn't in everybody's favor. Tip number 4 is discuss your expectations with the other person about how the conversation was going to go, as opposed to maybe how it went. Sometimes this can be a shield for us for being able to actually move forward to resolve the conflict, because we're so stuck on how we thought it was going to go. So discussing it together about what each person's expectations are can be very helpful. Which brings me to tip number 5, which is the resolution of the conflict. And this should be addressed by both parties, not just one. We as maybe problem solvers like to step in and start creating solutions to the problem. However, this might work for us, but not the other person. So we want to make sure that we're addressing that. We need to brainstorm together some ideas of how to expect to resolve the conflict, not only now, but how about in the future? We want to prevent the conflict from maybe happening again. And so this is a great learning lesson to figure out how to break that pattern and start creating new solutions that are going to work for everyone. If this does occur again, maybe in a different scenario, but same kind of circumstance. So really brainstorming together is going to be the most effective here. For more information about conflict resolution, don't forget to check out my monthly book recommendation, Difficult Conversations: How to Discuss What Matters Most. And this is by Douglas Stone, Bruce Patton, and Sheila Heen. With these just few short tips that we've talked about today, we're able to discuss and resolve differences with one another and the ones around us in a more productive way. So thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will see you next time.